Hi, I'm Sienna, and this is my first video on a tarot series. And I want to apologize for the roughness of this because I'm kind of new at it. But what I'm not new at is being able to explain the tarot deck to people in layman's terms. So, to start off, let me tell you, I'm not a tarot expert. However, I have been reading since the 90s for the public and for myself. And I've taught this class several times over the last several decades. Unfortunately, most of those times were in person and not on video. So I'm really not that great at this. Bear with me. I think we can get through this. Anyway, what I want to start off with is the history of the tarot deck. A lot of people don't know this, but it started in the 13th century with these roaming bands of mercenaries called mamluks. Now, they roamed from Turkey to Albania and all the way to Italy in the 13th century, and they created a deck of cards that had four suits and face cards. And I'm going to try and do a screen share here that will allow me to show you what that mamluk deck looked like. Start there. Um, Here we go. And that first mamluk deck looked like this. So they had coins and polo sticks, swords, and cups, which we now recognize as the four suits in both tarot and playing cards. They also had three court cards: kings, viceroys, and deputy viceroys. Now, the Mamluk deck was probably quite precious to these people because it was made out of paper, which didn't survive very well in those conditions. And also, they all had to be hand drawn. So, um, the Mamluks would probably have been quite, cautious with who they shared these decks with. Now, the second piece of the tarot came along several centuries later in Italy in the 15th century, and we saw a deck full, what they called the Triumphi deck, which is where we get the word triumph and, quite ironically, Trump. The deck that we're talking about here, let me try another screen share. That would be the Italian deck is on the next page. There we go. And you can see we have what we now recognize as a sun card, right? And here we have the star card. And it looks like this might be an emperor or an empress here. And whoops, we'll come back to that. And so this is the origins of the major arcana. And there were 22 of these. So after that, those two decks married somewhere in the 15th century. But then around the 16th century, the Judaic Hebrew tribes got their hands on it and discovered that there were 22 of those major arcana, which matched up with the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The scholars decided to adopt the tarot at that point as a language to describe mysticism between people who didn't share the same language. And at that point, they put it all into this format. And this is what I call my tarot cheat sheet. Most of you will recognize that as the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. They are one and the same. So if you can't find the download for this, which I'm going to try and plug into this video at the end, any download of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life will work for this video series. Okay, I'm not screen sharing anymore. Good. Okay. So in the 1800s, they became more occult because of the writings of Eliphas Levi. And then A.E. Waite in the 1900s know the standard tarot deck that we know today. That's when that was created. If you want any more information on any of that history, I have a good feeling that you can find it all over the internet. Speaking of the internet, where do you get the right tarot deck for this series? Well, what we want you to have here is the 78 card variety of any deck. It doesn't matter really which deck you get for this series. As long as it has 78 cards in it, you're doing all right. You're doing the right thing. We have several options to purchase them. Please do yourself a favor and don't go through Amazon.com. You really want to know where the energy of these decks have been. So I would recommend a place like namaste.com. Powellsbooks.com is my very favorite because that's a local store here to Portland. And then Barnes & Noble does have a little bit of better karma than you're going to find in Amazon.com, but probably not by much. I will keep my opinions on corporate karma out of this if I can. Expect to pay about $20 for a tarot deck. And here's the way I suggest that you choose one. Don't wait for somebody to give you one. That would be forever. Go to these websites and look at the images. Clear your mind, be nice and grounded, and whatever images sing to you, speak to you, feel like they are yours, I would recommend taking a closer look at those decks, because you want a deck that you relate to with the images. A lot of people learn best if they can affiliate these images in their heads with the feelings that the cards are supposed to represent. You know, the cool thing about the human brain is that we like to make connections between things. And the tarot deck is one of those basic allegorical standards, like Jungian archetypes that are in it that can relate to our inner psyche. So that's why I'm really engrossed in the tarot as a mental health counselor. So what will you need for this series? What you're going to need is a table big enough to lay out your cards end to end like this. And you want to be able to lay out 10 in a row. So that might be a kitchen table or dining room table. You might have to get out a card table or clear your desk. The tarot cheat sheet, this thing, you want that printed out on paper if you can. And now we'll get into that later in a different video. But if you can get that on paper, that'd be great. You also need, of course, the writing implement of your desire and the tiny little book that came with your tarot deck. And I will tell you right now that a lot of things that I'm going to say are going to contradict that tiny little book. Apparently, on the surface, it's going to look like a contradiction, but it really isn't. What you're going to find is that that tiny little book was written by somebody who has an opinion that is different than yours. That's all. It's not a contradiction. So before we get started in the next video, here's where you need to prepare. I want you to take your deck, whatever that looks like, and first of all, take your cheat sheet and fold it up to be the same size as the deck or close enough to fit in the box that your deck came in, okay? So you want that. Then you want to take the deck itself and you want to divide it into 3 different parts. You know, look at your the faces of the cards, and you want to make 3 piles. You want a pile of major arcana, a pile of face cards, and a pile of number cards. Eventually, we will separate those number cards into their suits. So if you're a little OCD around the edges, you can go ahead and do that too. But right now, just separate out the major arcanas from the rest of the deck, because the next video will be about only the major arcana. Now, how do we know the major arcana from the rest of the deck? Normally, under most circumstances, that major arcana will have a Roman numeral at the top. If it doesn't have a Roman numeral at the top, look in your little booklet that came with your deck, and it'll tell you how to tell what the major arcanas are and which ones are not. There is a contingent of people that call the face cards the minor arcana. I kind of cringe around that because it's just too hard to wrap your brain around. I prefer to call them face cards and number cards. So in the next video, we will be focusing only on the major arcana and the cheat sheet. That's all you're going to need. Okay, so I'll wrap up this one and I will see you in the next video. Take care.